Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Babs. It's truly an honor to be introduced by the power in the Miller family, the real power behind our state representative. No, the sacrifices that Rick and Babs have made for the good of this county and the good of this country is overwhelming, and we're looking for really wonderful things from Rick in the future. He's got a great career ahead of him, and he is what we are working hard for all across this nation, is God-fearing, strong, conservative, constitutional conservatives serving in this country, and we've got to do everything that we can do to support them. I'll talk about that in just a moment. And thinking and talking to Jean about what she wanted to talk about is not normally what I'm not going to speak about, and we'll get into it in the question and answer period. But I do want to talk about a bigger vision than what any and all of our candidates out there and elected officials are saying right now. I won't get into a whole lot of details about it because I want to get to the point that we talk to each other about how you can be effective, and I want to encourage you and talk specifically of how you can make a difference in this country. And I know politicians always talk about this could be the most important election in history. A lot of them now that are running for president are talking about how this is, and 2016 is going to be the most important election in history. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is, in my opinion. We're at a point that we were at in 1776, and we are at a point that we were at in 1860s with the Civil War. This is the turning point for this country, whether it's going to survive or it's not. And I truly believe that. And I believe it for many different reasons. And it's reasons beyond any specific issue. The reasons are, in my opinion, is that this country has turned its back on God. And we are reaping the consequences of doing that. This country was created by God for God's glory, not for our comfort. So when I pray to God to save this nation, I pray to God to save this nation for His glory, not my comfort. Because who knows what that means if we are walking with Him. But if you look, I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but the reason that we have the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is because our founding fathers, whether the left would try to convince you or not, were men of God. And they, or at least if they were not men of God, or some of them weren't, they studied God. Because in the educational system of those days, God, the Bible, religion was very much a part of their higher learning. And they studied all the great philosophers. And so it was a focus of theirs and their worldview that was expressed in the Declaration of Independence and ultimately in the Constitution. However, because through the history of this country, we as a country, as a people, well, slowly but surely have turned from Him and given Him, or given this country, to the left. You know when progressivism really started was Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto before the Civil War. Before the Civil War. That's when they started teaching in Europe. Progressivism started in Europe in the early 1800s. It became a body of thought. Socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, progressivism, it became the cool thing to be and to think in Europe. Our philosophers, our intellectuals, our professors traveled to Europe to learn and brought it back to the United States. At first, most people don't even know this. I didn't know it until I studied it. Teddy Roosevelt's the first progressive president in America. He studied it. He learned progressivism in universities. Woodrow Wilson was the Mr. Progressive who started this whole progressivism, this whole socialist mentality back in those days as it came forward. In fact, it was Teddy Roosevelt, and I claim whenever you mess around with the Constitution, you're going to end up messing with the country. But in 1913, passed two amendments, 16 and 17, to the Constitution that was really the kickoff, the groundbreaking of the beginning of socialism in this country. And they passed the 16th Amendment that allowed taxation by the federal government. Instituted the income tax. And the 17th Amendment, which I think was the worst, was they started electing United States senators by popular vote instead of by the legislature. That was the beginning of the end of state sovereignty and the destruction of the 10th Amendment. And was the beginning of this big government era that we have now seen being built over the last 130 years. Without going step by step throughout the history of the United States, it progressed with FDR, the New Deal, the LBJ, the war on poverty, step by step, incrementally moving away from the Constitution and towards socialism in this country. Away from the Constitution, which has basically, the Constitution was written to protect our rights, protect the rights of the minority against the majority. It is not, we do not have a democracy. I hate democracy. I hate democracy. I love republics. I love the United States of America, which is a republic. It's not a democracy. Hitler was the head of a democracy. Stalin was the head of a democracy. They voted just like we do. But I won't get all into that, the details of that, but progress, slowly but surely. The philosophy of the Constitution is to protect our rights, and particularly protect our rights from a tyrannical government. Not to build a government, not to build a government that takes care of you from womb to grave, not a government that puts up red lights. Where do you go? Red light cameras that take pictures of you as you drive through an intersection. Big brother government, wherever you look, whether it be the local school board, the city government, the county government, the state government, or the federal government. Our Constitution was to keep us as free as possible by protecting our rights. The progressive's worldview is, like everything else, government and society evolves. And whatever is good for society trumps the freedom of individuals. And government is good for society, so we're going to grow government bigger and bigger and be more involved in your life. That's where we are today. And the most important part of it is that it has been accelerated because Obama became president of the United States. Now, sometimes I feel like maybe Obama's the best thing that's ever happened to this country in waking us up to what the result is of this progressivism worldview. But you're seeing it everywhere, and you ain't seen nothing yet. He's got 2.5 years left. That's why it's incredibly important. And that's why some conservatives, certainly some Republicans, still don't get it. Especially some Republicans that are in leadership in the House and the Senate who still don't get it. They think that the Constitution calls on them to better manage the government than the Democrats. They don't get up in the morning and think about the Constitution and what they are doing all day long as it pertains to the Constitution. If they did, they wouldn't be doing a lot of what they've been doing. And frankly, many of us in this country have allowed all this 130 years to happen to us, because we have not stood up for what we believe in, and it's the Constitution and understanding the Constitution. So my message tonight is basically, almost my entire career was fought by being on defense, trying to stop what they have done, trying to turn around what they have done. And we made some progress. Welfare reform, I think, was one of our crowning glories. Now, if I were king, we wouldn't have welfare. It's unconstitutional, by the way. And we wouldn't have welfare. But we took welfare, which was an incredibly destructive program that destroyed families, that paid women to have children out of wedlock, that made sure that you didn't get your money unless the father of your child left you and you became a single parent. An incredibly destructive program, socialist program. And we turned it around, and millions of people are no longer on welfare because we did one thing that was incredibly unbelievable. We asked them to go to work. And when you ask people to go to work, they actually will. And millions did. Now, there's still millions in welfare, in the welfare culture. And by the way, most people are not even paying much attention to it. But last year, Obama signed an executive order doing away with the work requirement for welfare. Did you know that? Unconstitutional, lawless. Should have been impeached for that alone. But my point is that we can no longer be on defense. We are at a strategic time in our country that we are presented with a stark difference between the two worldviews, a constitutional worldview and a progressive worldview, a socialist worldview. And it's becoming, people cannot ignore it. They're seeing it firsthand. They're seeing the consequences of it firsthand. So now is a great opportunity to be going on offense. Going on offense. How do we do that? You require it. You as an organization, if you belong to the Republican Party, you require it of your party. You require it of your candidates. You require an offense. And that starts with the Constitution. Now, there's very few people in that I have seen, I've been watching it for now almost 5 years, watching who talks about the Constitution and who really understands it and how it applies to our lives. Ted Cruz. Rand Paul. And those are the only two that I can even quote right now. That when they get up to speak, you listen to what they're saying. They usually always start with the Constitution in their speeches, and then they take the Constitution and relate it to the issues of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we've raised 3 generations in our public school system of people that have no clue what the Constitution's about. Had no clue how it applies to our lives. Have no clue how to apply it to red light cameras. Have no clue on how to apply it to border control. Have no clue what is the philosophy of our government and how it applies. Is it the authority? Does the federal government have the authority to create a welfare program? Does the federal government have the authority to create Common Core? No. It's unconstitutional. And we should be demanding from our candidates, local, state, and federal level, to impose the Constitution on everything that they do. I want to hear from Ted Cruz that he wants to eliminate the Department of Education. It's unconstitutional. So is the Department of Agriculture. So is the Department of Labor. So is the Department of Commerce. All unconstitutional. We have got to insist on our federal officials, elected and to be elected, that they start imposing the Constitution on the federal level and bringing us back to a constitutionally designed federal government. That's how all these issues, doesn't matter what the issue is, if you demand that it's constitutional, it'll start changing. And the elected officials will start changing it. I want a constitutional state of Texas government. I have a governor's candidate right now, governor's race. We need to be asking our governor candidates, our candidates for attorney general, our candidates for lieutenant governor, our candidates for state and rep, our candidates for state senate. Are they going to stand up for the Constitution? And to me, the most important is the 10th Amendment. Are they going to stand up on the 10th Amendment and start fighting for the sovereignty of the state of Texas against an oppressive federal government? How do you do that? How you do that? It's very easy. In fact, it's happening in Oklahoma as we speak. When the Environmental Protection Agency comes in to Oklahoma and tries to confiscate land in Oklahoma, guess what happens? The sheriff in Oklahoma arrests the environmental protection people. They have no constitutional right to come into the state of Texas and impose a federal program from the Environmental Protection Agency. We have to stand up for our constitutional rights. And we have to have people that are elected in office that first understands there is a Constitution and understands that the people of Texas or any state has the right to demand their sovereignty back from the oppressive federal government and stand up. But there's other ways too. There's all kinds of ways. I want Greg Abbott to clean out the left in our universities in Texas. What is going on? I mean, there is not one conservative university in the state of Texas that's a state institution. That is overrun with the left. That is completely warping the minds of our children. I want my local school board to take over the public schools and get the left out of our schools. You know, it's the difference in offense and defense. The defense is, oh, do we pray at the ball game? Oh, I don't know if we should do that. So we're going to spend 3 weeks whether we're going to pass a rule that says you can't pray at a football game on Saturday night. That is cowardly. It's unconstitutional. And we ought to be on offense. My offense would be, you can agree with me or not, I don't really care. My offense would be, I would get the school board, the Fort Bend ISD, to put the Bible back into the school. It used to be in the public school system. It's those kinds of issues that will completely remake. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It took 130 years from when they first elected Teddy Roosevelt to where we now have Obama as president. You're not going to create a constitutional government in the next 2 elections, but you can elect people that understand that they need to be on offense. Now, let me just tell you, I'm sure that what you're thinking is, well, what can I do about it? You know, I'm just one person. What can I do about it? I come to Sugar Land Tea Party and I do whatever we can. Usually what happens, I don't know about your Tea Party, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but I've lived with conservatives my entire adult life, and I've dealt with them politically for 35 years. Usually what happens in a conservative organization is everybody comes together, we beat our chest, we complain about how Obama, we want to impeach Obama, or we hate this and we hate that and we hate this and we hate that, and then we go home. You don't walk out the door with an action item or an action plan or a strategy or whatever. I am an action-oriented guy. I find I want to get rid of the Democrat majority that has been the majority in the U.S. House of Representatives for 60 years. I came up with a plan. It was called Contract with America. And it'd take me 30 minutes to describe how it took us 5 years of developing a plan and implementing the plan till we got to 1994 and we won the majority in the House of Representatives for the first time in 60 years. It took planning and day by day action taken by a small group of people. Do you know that our founding fathers and the people that believed like our founding fathers were the minority? Were the minority in the United States of America? Do you know that Tom Delay got elected state representative in 1978 in Fort Bend County when they used to shoot Republicans? They didn't elect them. I was the first Republican elected to the state legislature in Fort Bend County. Some of you that may even be new to Fort Bend County, there used to be two parties in the Democrat Party in this county, the Woodpeckers and the Jaybirds. After the War of Northern Aggression, they created the Jaybird Party to keep blacks from holding office. And the Woodpeckers were black sympathizers. And there's a Jaybird monument down there on Morton Street in Richmond, Texas, that honors a gunfight that the Jaybirds and the Woodpeckers had out in front of the old courthouse. That's tough politics.
Can we get the Democrats to start shooting another?
Yeah. That's tough politics. And when I ran for office for state legislature, for a state representative, there were still Jaybirds around, 1978. And the way they used to run campaigns in the Democrat Party here in Fort Bend County is they had this group of county fathers that Hilmer Moore and Joe Clyde Wessendorf and some others, and they would pick, you're going to be the next county commissioner, you're going to be the county judge, you're going to be the state. And so they really didn't have to run elections. And they put out some cards, put up their signs. That was pretty much it, because you were the anointed one. Well, then comes the Republicans. You know, it took 84 women. Men wrote checks, women worked. That are called the Fort Bend County Republican Women's Club that adopted me. Nobody gave me any chance in hell of winning. 84 women in all of Fort Bend County got me elected. That's all it took. Now, some of them may regret it to this day that they did, but the point is that it was only 84 women. They made the calls, they stuffed the envelopes, they knocked on the doors. They did anything I asked them to do, and we got elected. And that's an old story, but it even started before then. I lived in Simonton, Texas, which is if you get on Westheimer and you go west, before you get to the Brazos River, there's Simonton, this little crossroads. And I lived in Valley Lodge at the time. I didn't know a soul. But I was trying to build my business and but every time I turned around, the government was messing with me. High taxes, regulations, one thing after another. It was amazing. I just figured it out one day that government was the cost of doing business, and I better get involved in it. So I became a precinct chairman. I was griping about it, and somebody said, why don't you do something about it? I said, well, what can I do about it? And they said, well, 3 days later, they called me back and asked me to be a precinct chairman for the Republican Party out in Simonton. Well, that was 1974, the election of 1970. I started working for some candidates and decided I could do some stuff to help people get elected. I became in the election, the general election of 1974, I was a poll watcher. And, Democrats hated that. Man, they hated that. I show up and I'm going to watch them in Simonton, Texas. They're my friends. I play golf with them and stuff, but boy, they didn't like having a poll watcher. They kicked me out at lunch. But I became a precinct chairman. They gave me a book on how to be a precinct chairman. I read the book. We didn't have computers back in those days, but I went around every door. There was only 5 Republicans in the entire precinct, by the way. My wife and I, another couple, and a little old lady whose husband was Democrat. 5 Republicans voted in the last primary in 1974. So after that election, they trained me to be a precinct chairman. I went door to door in every door in the precinct. I made sure everybody in the precinct was registered, even though I knew they were Democrat. But I had my little card file in my shoe boxes of every voter in that precinct. And when it was time for me to hold my first primary, 1976. I was so proud of it. Problem was I couldn't find a place to hold it. And I went to there's only one church in Simonton. I went to my church and said, I want to hold it in the rec hall. And they said, oh, no. The Republicans vote here, nobody come back to church. You can't use that. So I went to we had a little community hall where the Democrats usually voted in their primary. It was perfectly legal. They had 2 entrances and 2 exits, and we could put up a blind in between the 2 primaries, but they would not let me use the community hall. There was an empty storefront. Wouldn't let me use the storefront because nobody rented if the Republicans vote there. And finally, in the barn in my backyard, I set up some card tables and we held a primary. Had 168 people vote in my primary. Yeah. Now, I like to take credit for it, but it was Ronald Reagan running against Gerald Ford. It had a lot to do with it, but still, I sat all day long. I'm calling people on my little card file to come vote. Come vote. You hadn't voted yet. Come vote. And we had 168 votes. Well, that gets you put on a committee. And I was put on the candidate recruiting committee for the Fort Bend Republican Party. And I won't get into all that detail. And we got down to state representative, and it was an open seat. And somebody turned as a joke and said, hey, Delay, why don't you run? We all had a big laugh, but I was totally consumed for the next 6 weeks of running for state representative. The Lord had really put it on. Now, I wasn't walking with the Lord back then. I mean, He was protecting me. He was doing all kinds of things to put me in the right kinds of positions. But I wasn't walking with Him at the time. And yet He put me there, and we got elected in 1978, and the rest is history. My point is, it doesn't matter what you do, just do it. The Lord gives some people big talents to be a majority leader in the United States House of Representatives, or small talents to knock on doors, going precinct to precinct, working for an elected official. But I'm just encouraging this organization, number one, to grow. You've got to grow, so you need to reach out. And I suggested to Gene that this organization can become very powerful politically if it goes out and recruits at least one member to this organization from every precinct in this county. Now, a lot of people have criticism of the party. I'm not here to criticize the party or back and forth. That's not the point. The point is conservative people running for office like Dave here need people of all stripes from all different parts to put together a coalition in order to win. He needs the party, he needs the Tea Party, he needs all kinds of other people. But you can be a driving force for politics and for the Constitution coming right out of this room, particularly if you have at least one of your members from every precinct in the county as a goal. You may never reach that, but if you work towards that and you create meetings that people want to come to, and get elected officials to come to your meetings, so that people will want to go through and get involved in what's going on in the county that people want to be part of, then you will grow, and it will be exciting, and you will be fulfilled that something is happening in this county. Second, I so urge you, if you are an organization, you want to continue to be an organization, sit down as an organization and come up with 3 to 5 issues that are constitutional issues that are important to you in a school board race, in a city council race, in a county race, in a state race, and in a race on the federal level. You've got to know what you want out of these people. You can't just sit back and say, I want constitutional government. No. When you invite them to come speak to you, the first question ought to be asked is, what does the Constitution mean to you, and how is it applied in your personal life and your professional life? And then just sit there and listen. I tell you why I say that. I had just finished a session, my first session as state representative. I came home to my Rotary Club, Oyster Creek Rotary Club, and the program that day, my first day back from the session, were these high school students that were taking a course put on by a guy named Cleon Skousen on the Constitution. And they stood up, and the first question out of one of them's mouth was, how many amendments are there to the Constitution? Inside, I didn't answer because I didn't know the answer. I was totally embarrassed. I was an elected official. I was a state representative. Just got back from 140 days in the state legislature. I was something. I don't have to know the Constitution, but I was so embarrassed that I didn't know the answer to that question. I took the course that the high school kids were taking so I could learn the Constitution. And you know, I asked that question for 30 years to people on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, or the floor of the Senate, or the floor of the state legislature, or governors, or presidents. You know, less than 15% of the elected officials know the answer to that question. Now, it may sound silly, but my point is they didn't learn the Constitution either. And therefore, it's not important to them. And therefore, if something unconstitutional comes before them, they don't even know it's unconstitutional. And how can they fight it if they don't know it? So my point is that when you bring them here, ask them about the Constitution. Meet with them. Meet with them. They want to know you. They want to get to know you. Bring them before you, or get a committee to go meet with them. Even if they're elected and they're not up for election right now in this election, schedule a meeting with them. You know, I was president of the Greater Houston Pest Control Association. I thought I was something. I wanted my annual banquet to be the biggest, the best annual banquet that's ever been held by the Greater Houston Pest Control Association. So right before my banquet, we had fought licensing as a mandate from the federal government on the state of Texas for pest control companies. We tried to fight it, we lost. But our champion was my predecessor, as it worked out to be, Joe Hubenak. Joe Hubenak, and he was our champion. And I wanted him to come speak. Boy, I was scared to death to call him. I can't call a state representative and ask him to come speak. I got a book on protocol on how to write him. I agonized for days about how to call him. Could I call him? He might turn me down. I don't know. Will he take my call? He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. You know, finally I called him. Listen, I learned later, after getting elected and serving, that Joe Hubenak, like all other elected officials, are sitting there in their office with their hands poised over the phone, waiting for somebody to call them to invite them to come speak. So you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. But the point is if you have your issues that are important to you, then they need to know it. Second, you grow as a body by getting involved in elections. And if you can provide, doesn't have to be a lot, but if you can call up David Hamilton and say, what do you need? I need 3 callers on Saturday afternoon. And then you get your people to go over and make calls for him, or stuff envelopes for him, or just show up. They get to know you. You create a relationship between the two of you, and when he gets elected, he'll never, ever forget that you helped him get elected. That doesn't mean he owes you anything. What that means is you have a relationship that you can call on him and remind him what's important to you, and work with him after he's elected in developing a strategy to introduce the bills in the state legislature that reflect what you want to see happen in the state legislature. Then you can team up and create all this wonderful. It is incredibly exhilarating to pass a bill. It's even more exhilarating to watch the governor sign it. You can be a part of that. So my point is what was that? What did Ben Franklin say to that lady as they're walking out after they had signed the Constitution? The lady asked him, "Here we have a democracy," and he says, "Yes, madam, if you can keep it." The only way you keep it is by doing your bit. That's been our problem. I'm not blaming y'all for anything, but the American people have gotten so comfortable and so into their stuff that as long as they can have their stuff, they don't care that Obama is president of the United States. But when it starts affecting their stuff, they'll start coming out and making a difference. But you know what? We don't need them. I'd love to have them. But a group like I can win a race. I can win any race you want to deal with by just motivating this number of people in a campaign that are dedicated to get somebody elected. It can happen. It can happen. And you can make it happen. And maybe, just maybe, we can turn over something to our children, our grandchildren, that's a little bit better than what we found it to be when it was turned over to us. So God bless you. God bless everything that you're doing. I just can't help but be excited about you.